Is the sound okay?
No, we don't hear anything.
Hello? Yeah. Hi, I'm Manar Morsi, the founder of Studio Mean, an experimental design studio based here in Cairo. My work spans the fields of architecture, art, and product design. The title of today's lecture is Supernatural Design, Rituals and Myths. So you may be wondering, what is the relationship between the supernatural and design work? Well, to answer this question, I would first like to define the role and attributes that I assign to what I call the supernatural, through three specific, yet parallel and simultaneous strands. So the first strand of meaning I associate with the supernatural explores the term as the supernormal, the everyday, the banal, the relentlessly ordinary, but also supernatural as what comes naturally and instinctively. So deriving from this supernatural, it becomes the protagonist of a work that is unpolished, unfinished, wabi-sabi in its imperfection, and which employs in its vocabulary materials from our everyday context. The second strand addresses the effect of supernatural climatic phenomena, and it uses as its stimulus real or imagined extreme moments of nature and responds to them through design. And the third one considers the role of the supernatural, as we might know it more commonly, the fantastic, the utopic, and the imaginary, and layers these fictions in the design work. So together, these strands have led me to develop work that transcends the traditional boundaries of architecture, which is what my background and training is. And I've embraced artistic practice, but also have been following the latest work and in a variety of disciplines, from literature to sociology, philosophy, and anthropology. My research and design work demonstrate that supernatural can be understood at a variety of design scales, from object, as in my work on the project 1001 Street Chairs in Cairo, to buildings, as I've examined in writing in a recent house I designed in Kuwait, to problems at the scale of urban and landscape ecology, as I have explored most recently in my work on environmental issues in a playfully and imaginary context of an inundated post-tsunami Tokyo. So using these scales that I just mentioned as a framework, object, building, and urban ecology, I will try to shed a light on my work for you today, but I first wanted to define what this term supernatural means to me and how it plays out in my work. So starting with the scale of the product or object. So more and more, both artistic and design practices are focusing on the micropolitics of informal design in urban public spaces. My contribution to this discussion comes in the form of a forthcoming publication that's titled Learning from the Sidewalk, 1001 Street Chairs in Cairo. This publication will explore the city of Cairo and its urban dynamics through the lens of the often overlooked, supernatural, and apparently banal object, the street chair. This publication will draw attention to creative practices of design that occur every day on the sidewalk, and will document the unplanned interventions in the public space that give Cairo its distinctive character. So street chairs are typically the result of a creative process of post-production based on an archive of chairs that are available to their owners. People working on the sidewalks carve for themselves a zone of relative comfort by pimping their chairs with cartons, cushions, as you can see in these images. They redesign the chair itself, the basic chair, making hybrid pieces in which disparate elements coexist in surprisingly harmonic and effective ways. So, structured around a series of walks, this project will produce a photographic archive, supplemented by interviews with the users of the chairs, like asking them about the time they spend on the sidewalk and the design of their chairs. This archive will be accompanied by maps, which index the original location of each chair. The mapping aspect of the book will not only reveal a unique way of engaging with the city, but will also shed a light on the spatial and sociological characteristics of Cairo. Third, like gender dynamics, harassment, surveillance, so on and so forth. So further to the photographs, interviews, maps, and essays, the publication will contain a piece of fiction commissioned to an Egyptian writer who will be invited to reflect on a street chair photograph, or a real one, taken in his area of residence. This imaginative vignette will allow the reader to peep into the life of a chair user. So, further to learning from the sidewalk, 1001 Street Shares in Cairo, which focuses more on archiving and publication as mediums of expression, I have also worked on the scale of the object by designing new products, implementing acts of translation and recycling as integral parts of my practice. My furniture line, Palm Crate of the Grid, took the pattern of the standard and ubiquitous Egyptian palm fiber market crate and repurposed it to build furniture. The results, tables or shelves or lamps, are variations on the same theme that combined in different ways to form new set structures. So here you can see some images of that work. In so doing, the project sought to reinvigorate the traditional artisanal craft of palm crate making, using a renewable material source and drawing appreciation to this craft's wabi-sabi aesthetic of imperfection, transience, and incompleteness. The research processes to produce off the grid and 1001 street chairs allows me to engage with the users and the makers of these objects that I choose to work with. So the stories associated with the objects have become an integral part of my design work. These voices, documented through interviews and personal narratives, shed a light on the city from various marginal viewpoints and contribute to a socio-economic understanding of the expanding city. So moving on from the scale of the product to the more extreme and larger scale of the urban landscape, in my work I'm drawn to the way in which supernatural, fictive, imaginary, and utopic visions of the city can allow new ways of seeing and understanding. Further, I'm intrigued by supernatural climatic phenomena, from tsunamis to rising sea currents, and understanding how they can dramatically impact the way our urbanity is configured. And I use these kind of hyperbolic imaginary situations to try to explore new political and sociological alignments. My teaching and research have often revolved around these concerns. So in a workshop conducted in Dubai during a hot conference, I challenged my students to map Dubai in non-visual terms and to find new ways to see and represent the city. The questions for the workshop asked, how do you represent smell with abstracted smell? And how do you represent memory in this transient city? So interviews, walks, and map installations were developed by participants and used as a design tool. The idea being that I wanted to convey that even the traditional representational tools that we use, like drawing a section or drawing a plan, can be questioned and can be instrumented in integrating a different narrative and different sensory experiences other than the visual. I see a lot of potential in challenging representation and using it as a device into and onto itself to stage original design work. So in a forthcoming publication on Tokyo, titled Still City Tokyo, I was invited to reflect on post-growth Tokyo by the Dutch urban research collective Monarch. One of the works I proposed was titled The Possibility of Islands, 15 Steps for a Pink Plastic Pirate Utopia. So this piece looked at the ways in which ubiquitous plastic crates, so I switched from the palm fiber in Cairo to the plastic crates in Tokyo, and how they can easily be reconfigured to create inexpensive, floating, modular habitats and reefs in a post-tsunami Tokyo. So I did this little installation when I was there, but I'll show you now the renders of the actual final project. So here I imagine Tokyo to extend into the water. So this is like an imaginary scenario, like what if there's rising currents and Tokyo is completely flooded with a tsunami, and I imagined it to extend into the water and the water into the city. And aqueous neighborhoods were imagined to accommodate housing and so as you can see, these are like little colonies or archipelagos of these plastic islands. So it was designed in hopes that these new archipelagos of artificial islands would reduce the impact of storm-induced wave energy and improve the ecology of estuarine environments. The archipelagos were projected to be nomadic, mobile, and responsive, meaning that you can move your colony to another colony. Together, they formed a competitive system, so using like a market competitive system. If I don't like this government, I can move to this other government. And that the government or the politics governing these people would be determined by them. So in this way, it was a very supernatural solution, using something that's on the street, that's banal and simple, and accommodating the supernatural effects of the environment. So, as with my research and urban work, in my architectural practice, now moving to architecture and building, to integrate these different contexts, these different urban scales, and here is like a very abstract diagram that, to begin with, representing nature versus man, architecture versus nature, and it became a guiding kind of outline for the design. As you can see, the top floor, like this is a diagrammatic concept for the plan. And as you can see, the bottom floor is like smaller kind of rooms deriving from the grid of the city, but overall together the compound can be taken as relating to the grid of the shopping malls and that context that's also there. But the idea is that you're moving in nature. You go into the disaster relief, like earthquake, kind of very violent atmosphere that we recreate, because that's what the center is about. It's about educating people about these extreme environmental situations. And then you go out into these like green lungs, these corridors that you can see on the bottom floor, and you're in this very serene, quiet space. So it's really playing on this contrast between these two things. And then there is 3 levels. There is the ground, air, and sky level. And the air level is supposed to be different roof parks on top of the roof of the ground level. And everything is the negative. Like, so the top floor, all of that are void, and it brings in light to the building, as you can see. Here are the plans. This is one of the renders, and that was the final kind of look. So, further to this, I've designed a house in Kuwait, which had to consider these dualities again of extreme kind of supernatural conditions, because Kuwait has an extremely hot context. And this is the house that just recently got constructed. So I wanted to relate it somehow to what you guys are doing, and I don't usually show this, but I'm going to show you my thesis work at Princeton, which is the text from which all of this work, I can say, derives in some way. So basically, the idea of the Princeton project or thesis, the way I began the exploration was I read a ton of books about boredom. Don't ask me why, but I was obsessed with boredom in the 19th century, boredom in the 20th century, and how this concept of boredom, like the dandy, the flaneur of the 19th century, then changes to this really overstimulated and blasé kind of protagonist. And I had all these philosophical explanations of boredom and words related to boredom. And I started, I mean, this is the final thing, but I started to recreate rooms that bored people were living in the books by doing collages or models of how do these people experience the space. And I was seeing boredom as a very productive thing. That boredom can create creativity. Boredom, like being in this really banal moment can be a productive thing. And so I was trying to recreate it. And so I did these collages, as I mentioned, and then I ended with a glossary of terms. So repetition, banality, so supernatural can be said to derive from one of these terms. And because of the word repetition, I chose a program where it's repetitive, like it would either be an office or a hotel or a hospital. And I chose the hotel because I felt it would have more fun kind of experiences that I can create. So I took the Marriott Marquis, which exists in Times Square, and I decided to redesign a whole floor with rooms of extreme sensory overstimulation. They were using even environmental kind of things like wind, or to create a wind tunnel room so you're floating in this room, or sound, or and the idea is you would go into these rooms and you would be overstimulated to the point of boredom. And so this was the final model, just to go back. And the model itself could be experienced with like heat, like if this was steam in the middle. There were different textures you could put your hand in. There were cameras that were surveilling you. There were mirrors. There was sound. There was, photographs don't really explain well, but that was my thesis. So this was a camera obscura room, for example. This was a room that isolates you with sound. It's all using sponges. This was the earth room with greenery. So it creates an extreme experience of moisture and humidity and a smell, a very strong smell. So, and there were even bubbles in my thesis. So basically, from this project, a lot of my work today continues to derive. It has a playful element. I derive a lot of my work from reading, from fiction, from this to create these imaginary kind of situations. And it also has to do with environmental kind of situations, or extreme environmental situations. So that's why your thesis is important. So anyway, so I would like to finally shed a light on my experience working here in Cairo. The supernatural myths and rituals associated with that. So after completing my master's from Princeton, I moved back to Cairo. And as a designer whose work is more research-oriented and experimental, as you can see, the natural place for me would have been to be in academia, teaching, and developing my practice in tandem. So I found that in Cairo, this kind of idea of working in that way doesn't really work, because there are kind of rigid notions of teaching with a PhD at the public universities, at least. And so, for that reason, I tried to find an office job that kind of did a little bit kind of experimental work. And I worked for a couple of years, but I wasn't finding, again, the right space. And it makes sense, because to have these kinds of practices that are experimental, they need to be supported in some way with academic work or other kind of work. So I started to work for the UN, and I was doing a policy paper when I started to do Off the Grid. And because I was writing this 30-page paper about, security of tenure of housing in Cairo, I decided, well, why not? This is my opportunity to try something while I'm doing this. And I had always been obsessed with these crates, and I thought they were really beautiful. So I started to collect them in my house. And started to make things with them. I'd never done product design before. And I wasn't sure of myself. I was, what am I doing? Is this nice? Is this not nice? So I thought a good test would be to apply for awards and competitions. And I won 2 awards, the Red Dot Design Award and a Good Design Award for the project. So I thought, okay, so I'm onto something here. So I applied for the British Council Grant for Artists, which I encourage you, if you have a project that you're thinking of, to apply for as well. And that helped me to develop my work, that project, the palm fiber experiment, a little bit more and push it further. But then I thought, well, maybe I could start up my own business with this. So I decided, is this viable as a business? Why don't I test it again? So I applied to a business plan competition this time. I applied to the MIT business plan competition, and I was selected as one of the top 10 finalists, and we had to do like a 30-page business plan, something, again, I had never done before, but I learned a lot from that experience that I need a lot of capital, I need a lot to hire people to do this, like things that I hadn't really accounted for as a designer and artist. I don't really think about the business kind of aspects and reality. So now I'm really thinking how to work here in this context, because it's a very difficult and challenging context. But I think because it's difficult and challenging, that there is also a lot of opportunity. I never see that as a defeating thing. On the contrary, I see it with optimism, and I see that it provides a lot of opportunities for us. So with that, I would like to open the floor to your questions, and I invite you all to follow both the Studio Meme and the 1001 Street Chairs in Cairo projects, which are Facebook, Tumblr, and Twitter. And my website is manarmorsi.com, and there I upload all of my work, the different kinds of strands, since I'm working on very different things. So thank you for this.